What's going on, everyone? This is our first time doing a podcast in this room, and it's not going to be like Cool Places, Cool People. Not like the other podcasts. It's more educational. Pepperoni? Yes, pepperoni pizza. Thank you. No, you probably need two. Okay. Yeah, got it.
Big boys.
And so with everything going on, this podcast room is going to be more for like educational stuff, real estate stuff. So we, with everything going on, I had my boy Mike Ortiz come in, who's a lawyer who handles estates. And with everything going on with the coronavirus, we thought it was important to maybe have a little sit down and talk about the things you need to be prepared for. You know, for people know this hits people over 65, which, you know, a lot of people don't have properties in trust or trust about properties, and if that means that's going to probate or there's accounts and all these kind of things, and going on the difference between a trust and a will. So we thought we'd just have a little spitball to talk about these things that kind of help people out. First off, I want to drop my sponsor. Thank you to Modern Lending. They're our number one loan officer. If you need refis or you're looking to purchase, they are the best in the game. They actually just won Rookie of the Year for brokerages in the United States. So reach out to Brian Decker or Taylor Loop. Those are our guys over there. But from then, Mike, thank you for coming on, buddy.
Glad to be here, man. And like I was telling you earlier, first ever podcast. So
how's it feel?
Breaking it in. It's surreal, man.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's actually pretty funny, I would say, like how like quickly this is all like happened, right? Like we last week I'm like, we should have a podcast room. Now we have a podcast room.
Yeah.
So and it's almost like perfect timing now that like you were gonna drop a video yesterday and you went on my Instagram, I already dropped one here. So it's like our speed to put out content, I think, is gonna be very important, especially with so many things happening out in the real estate market and all this kind of stuff. It's just changing so quickly that we have to stay on top of it. So Mike, why don't you tell people who you are?
Yeah, so my name is Mike Ortiz. I am the owner and founder of Ortiz Law, Premium Estate Planning, and I grew up in Riverside County, Norco, California. Graduated from Norco High School. Yeah, beautiful city of Norco.
Mm-hmm.
Went to UCR, graduated there, philosophy degree, super nerd. Went to law school at Arizona State and came back here, worked at a firm in downtown Riverside for a couple years, went out on my own 2 years ago, and started doing business law, startup law. Very interested in the startup tech scene, intellectual property, and as a business owner, just gauging the market. The reality is that not a lot of small businesses have a lot of money for lawyers. So I had to pivot, and luckily I found my way into estate planning. And I've always been into service, volunteering, helping the community. I was in the Marine Corps Reserves for 6 years, and I find that I get that same feeling in estate planning as I did when I was in the Marine Corps. So it's great because other areas of law that I practice, I do business law and I help businesses resolve disputes. And, if anyone's ever been into a heated argument about money, imagine that times 15 or 25. And as an attorney, you're in, all these arguments with other lawyers, and it's just so petty and very exhausting. So I'm glad I found my way into estate planning. And then I met you some months ago, and you got me doing videos every day. Hadn't used my Instagram ever.
Yeah, dude, you got to push stuff out. But I think that's the thing with like what you do is like we don't really think about it. You know what I mean? And until like something like this happens, where now all of a sudden, people are running to the grocery store buying just toilet paper because we don't really plan for the future. I don't think too many people even have like the like earthquake. Like I remember growing up a kid, you got to have an earthquake pack. I don't think anyone has one of those at their house. So going into like, obviously we don't want, hopefully we are taking the steps not to have a massive problem, but we do need to know and we need to speak about like what happens if. Because you always got to be prepared for what's going to happen. If it doesn't happen, mazel tov, awesome. We don't use it. But even at the age of 32, I'm creating a trust right now with you. So it's like, even at a young age, I think anyone, if you have assets, you have to have it in a trust, because if not, then it's kind of like I just went through my grandpa passing away, and that's how we met. I mean, thank God he had a trust and everything was kind of lined up. I mean, it was pretty simple. I mean, there's a few things that some accounts I didn't even know about and this, that, and the other, but I could not imagine if there was nothing written down. So why don't you take the step between, obviously a lot of people hear about wills and trust. Why don't you explain the difference between them?
Yeah. So first, I just want to comment. Your grandpa did a great job in making sure that he was prepared for you and your family, and as you said, it made it a lot smoother to transition. So most people have heard will or trust, and the will was the traditional estate planning tool. You basically have a piece of paper that says, I have this property, and I want my children to split it 50-50, or if you have 4 kids, 25% each. You can have specific distributions. You can say, I want my car to go to my grandchild. I want my home, to go to my, my disabled or my special needs child during their lifetime to live in. So generally, we use a will as the simplest tool to distribute our assets. We also can choose who's going to be the administrator or the executor. So who's going to handle the distribution. And a trust is also used for that. But a trust, I like to analogize a trust as being sort of like a separate entity. Well, it is a separate entity, but it's sort of like if you were to form a corporation, and the corporation is separate from yourself. Corporation has its own assets. Corporation has a CEO. A trust has a trustee. And in a corporation, if the CEO passes away, well, we just put another CEO in his or her place, and the corporation carries on as if nothing happened. Whereas with a will, unless your personal property is less than $162,500, you absolutely have to go to court to handle the administrative process. And so because of that difference, a trust is usually a lot smoother. In court, just to get a court order that gives the representative authority to start talking to banks on the decedent's behalf, or start changing title to vehicles and stuff like that, it takes at least a few weeks, a lot of times a month or more. So it's very slow and it's very expensive. So with a will, if you have to go to court, the state of California sets the attorney's fees for a will, and it's a percentage of the value of the estate. So it's 4% of the first 100,000, 3% of the second 100,000, 2% of the next 800,000, and then it decreases from there. So if you have a home, which is, I think, one of the key questions I ask clients when trying to figure out whether they should have a will or trust, do you own real estate? Real estate in California is probably the cheapest you're going to find is like $300K, right? So if you have a $300,000 home and you pass away, and that home needs to go, the title to your home needs to go to your heirs, well, your heirs are going to spend at least 4 plus 3 plus 2, that's $9,000. So at least $9,000 in value,
just to transfer just to give them what they are written down on paper.
Exactly, just to give them what they're entitled to by law or on paper. So whereas a trust is a lot cheaper in the front, and even after you pass, you still should hire an attorney to help you administer the trust, but it's ultimately going to be cheaper in the long run, and it prevents a lot of issues that can come up. We could talk about it later, but just because a will is going to require the court to be involved just slows things down, and it just opens everybody up to fighting, to theft, to, I've seen, even without, this person didn't have a will, but somebody passed away, their children started using their vehicle. The title was still in the decedent's name. The vehicle got towed. Tow yard wouldn't release it because the title wasn't in anybody's name. Tow yard ended up selling the car, So,
well, I think especially right now with everything shutting down, like when you think about worst case scenario, like at this moment in time, if someone passed away right now and you had a will, there's no court right now. Like with the trust, and just personal experience, I just walked into a bank with the trust, the death certificate, and said, "Here you go." And they said, "Oh, okay, here's your ID. Boom. Here you go. What do you want to do with this account? Close it out? Yeah, okay, here you go. Here's a check. You're done."
Exactly.
Like instantly, I didn't have to call anyone or nothing. I just walked in and took care of it. And the even thing with even anything else, I just walked in, called them on the phone, emailed them the trust, emailed the death certificate, emailed my ID. Okay, here you go. Mail it to me.
Yeah.
And so it just seems like it was just such a smoother transition that it didn't really take. So let's talk about someone who, the steps to even get a trust. Is it just straightly reach out to you, or any, obviously any attorney? Is that the first step that someone needs to do?
Yeah. So, because there are so many things to consider, I think the first thing somebody should do is educate themselves. And part of my practice is to I have all of my clients, I try to get them to attend an educational workshop that I give. They were in person, but now I'm transitioning because of what's going on to webinars. But it's good to educate yourself, because when you're educated before you talk to an attorney, you can you understand the lingo, and you have an idea of how you envision your estate to go, right? So and it could be if you have, if there are or like stepchildren, or, especially, nowadays people get married more than once. So we have children from the first marriage, children from the second marriage. And then we have children that maybe we do want to give money outright to, and children we don't want to give money outright to. Just educating yourself about a trust, and then reaching out and setting up a consultation with myself or any attorney in your area, because a trust is very comprehensive and you can do so many things with it. So it's good to educate yourself first.
And then and then after that step, you get into that point. So let's talk about, obviously we know the benefits of having a trust and the benefit of, being prepared for the worst case scenario. Let's talk about what happens when we don't have one. You know what I mean? Because that's really what people want to know.
Yeah.
A lot of people probably think, oh, well, I'm married, I have no kids, I'm just going to transfer everything to my wife if I pass away, or the other way. But let's talk about what ends up happening when someone passes away with a property or something like that. So let's just go real estate, because that's what I'm in. So Let's talk about someone passes away, they don't have a trust, and you have children and all these other things. So what would be like where you'd have to go to court and stuff like that?
Yeah. So even, and I'll just take a step before you pass away. A lot of times people don't realize that a lot of times we don't die immediately. We either, like, people have a stroke or heart attack, or get into an accident or something to where they're still alive, but they're in a coma. Or, they're just incapable of making decisions, but their heart is still beating, their lungs are still breathing. And in that situation, a will would not take any effect. So in that, first stage, the minimum documents that anybody should have is a healthcare directive, which is like a healthcare power of attorney, and a financial power of attorney. And you also want to have a HIPAA release. So if something happens to me or you, and we don't pass away, but we're in a coma, or we're incapacitated, those are the documents where you appoint somebody. You say, I want Adam to be my healthcare agent, and you're going to talk to the doctors and say, okay, well, he said he didn't want this life extending treatment. He would rather pass away naturally. Or you can say, if rather than being a vegetable, so to speak, you can just pull the plug. You can make decisions like that, because, and I don't have the percentage, but a high percentage of people go through that before they pass away.
Well, I think that's like, even I never saw my grandpa's trust until he got cancer, and then we were like, hey, we need to find it. He gives it, and then I went through it, and there was a situation in there. It says if I am unable to make a decision, I want you to. It was my job to make a decision, and you had to speak to 3 doctors. It was 3 doctors that would state like, hey, listen, like he's not gonna make it or whatever. So if he's like, there was literally step by step what to do, and it was kind of easier for me because it's like if he did slip into a coma or something like that, I didn't have to like, okay, what do we do? It was literally on paper. This is what he wants to be done, and I just have to follow the directions on what he wanted, and it made it a lot easier. And it made it easier where the aspect of it was like when the doctor came to the room or this person came, it was who do I need to speak to? Like everyone knew it was me. Like it was like you have to speak to that guy because I had to make every decision because it was on paper. This person makes the decision. And it did make things a lot simpler in the aspect it was like, well, who's going to make the decision? Who's this? Who does that? And so it was like almost like if you don't have one, you're really making it harder on your family because then it's like who makes the decision? Is it your brother? Is it your husband? Is it this person? Is that person? Like even though it was my grandfather, and you assume my dad was going to make the decision, my grandfather wanted me to make the decision. Yeah. So it was very easy for us not to be like, well, who makes the decisions? But it does make it hard too because if all of a sudden my dad was there, they had to call me. That was that was the only thing. It was like he's there, I'm not there. Well, you have to speak to him first. So
So and you brought up a good question. So if he didn't have that, who makes the decision? And if we don't have that, that's when you have to go to court and you do what's called a conservatorship. A conservatorship is literally you file a petition, and it's a very comprehensive petition. You have to get doctors to fill out court forms, which is very hard to do. Doctors hate doing it, and a lot of times they don't even do it correctly, and you have to go back to them. If let's say the person is wheelchair bound or bed bound, a lot of times the court wants the person to be in court themselves. So that's very difficult when somebody is medically, it's very difficult for practical purposes to get somebody into the court because in a conservatorship proceeding, somebody does get appointed now to have the authority to make those decisions, either only medically or medically and financially. And because the court is now involved, it's a lot more work. I mean, it's just the filing fee. So when you file it, it's about $450 just to file it. And then the court has to hire an investigator to do a neutral investigation, and their fee is about $675. Comes out to over $1,000 just in court fees alone to get this thing filed. And then you have the attorney's fees as well. And then same thing, it's court, so it's slow. So you might file it today, you won't get a hearing until next week. And then you get a hearing next week, and then you have to come back, in a month. And then if somebody's managing your finances, then that person that's managing the finances has to submit accountings to the court. So it's like having the court over your shoulder watching you do everything. And there's a lot of liability. If you're appointed as a conservator and you do something wrong, now everybody can sue you potentially for, a breach of those duties.
Yeah, I mean, and then so like going forward, like right now, obviously you should already have one in place, but when is the point comes when someone can't even make a trust, right? Like with things going south right now, like, you know what I mean? It's like, who knows, we don't really know what's going on, right? And like, I know my assistant has someone who is young, who has coronavirus, who's is on a breathing tube right now, so he can't make decisions, right? So for someone right now, where is the limit as a lawyer where that person can't even make these decisions anymore? Is it when they first get sick? Is it when they're incapacitated? Is it mental? And then who has to make those decisions?
So there's basically, in general purposes, the person has to understand, and depends on the document, but the person has to understand all of their rights and their property, and understand that what they're doing is going to affect their rights and property. So we call it like testamentary capacity. So for a healthcare power of attorney and a financial power of attorney, they have to understand what they're doing, which is hard to know, right? So if there's a dispute about that, it usually takes a lot of time and effort for the court to determine that. And for a will, it's the same thing, testamentary capacity. For a trust, the standard is a little bit lower, just because a will is a very special, unique document. A trust is very similar to a contract. So in order to be bound and enter into a contract, your capacity is a little bit lower than in order to be able to execute a valid will. But nonetheless, if somebody is suffering from onsets of dementia, if somebody has some sort of brain injury, then that's when the questions start to arise whether that person does have whatever capacity is necessary. So it's one of those things where if you wait to the last minute, and as an attorney, if somebody came to me and said, my father is suffering from dementia, or my father or my mother, and I determine that there's a question as to their capacity, I probably won't draft a trust or will, because now it exposes me to liability, and many attorneys feel that way as well. So it's just very important to do it beforehand. And when you're doing these things, it takes a lot of thought, right? Because I'm sure your grandfather had to think a lot about who he wanted to serve as the trustee or the healthcare agent. It's a big decision. So you want to think about that for a while. You don't want to make those decisions when your back is against the wall.
Yeah. And then so for you, you're a young guy, I'm a young guy. So where do you advise people to get their first trust? Is it like when they start having assets, when they get married? Where would be like the starting point in the perfect world where someone actually starts taking these steps?
Yeah, well, I mean, the most reasonable time is, as soon as you start getting assets. Like, even like I said, if you just have a vehicle, there's a potential that vehicle can get lost. So having a trust just makes everything so streamlined. And having a trust also takes care of that situation where if you have a stroke or, you get into an accident and you don't have capacity, or if you had a trust beforehand, at least you have somebody that could take over your finances very smoothly. So, I mean, as soon as you start getting even just a little bit of assets, a car, definitely once you have real estate, that's a great reason to get a trust, just to save the attorney's fees for your heirs. But so best case scenario, get it as early as possible, but a minimum, when you have $162,250 in personal property or more, or if you have assets that have title, like a home or real estate, or guns or vehicles, because putting the title in the trust means that the transition of ownership in those things is going to be a lot smoother. You're not going to have to go to court and wait months to change the title.
Well, and I think that's the thing too that I don't think people realize is, like, a funeral and these kind of things is expensive, know, and if, luckily we were fortunate where we had a trust and I could pull assets from my grandpa's estate. If not, then, and no one had the money to touch it, right? Then you're waiting months and months and months, and that means someone's forking out the cash on their own to handle that, even like life insurance and those kind of things that, like, luckily we had all written down, so it was very easy to transition that. So what is the standard rate that you see people paying to get in a trust started? Because I think that's what a lot of people fear factor is, like, money, right? It's like, well, it's obviously like we're like right now what we're going through, no one's prepared for this. Exactly. You know what I mean? So it's like a lot of people are like, that costs too much money. So what is the unknown? What is the number to that it costs to get an estate to start it and work done?
Yeah. So there are, when it comes down to it, a trust is just a piece of paper or a lot of pieces of paper, right? And you can buy those pieces of paper themselves very cheaply. There are, Office Max, Staples, I haven't seen them, but I'm sure they do because they have them for TurboTaxes and everything. Yeah. They have those programs of software where you just go and you could do your own trust. And I don't know how, they probably cost $50, right? you could go and you could get the paper. You can go to the library and find a sample trust. But just like with medical care or mechanics or anything, it is very true in the estate planning world is you get what you pay for. There are many things, tax implications, title implications. I mean, there are many things that the average person doesn't know. So if they do their own trust, the trust might be worthless. It might not even take effect. Well, I put out a video yesterday. A trust tip is one thing that I see is people get a trust, whether through a paralegal or a document prep company, get a $300, $600 trust, and the trust is there, but there's no property in the trust. And that's why it was so easy for you to transition the bank accounts, because the bank accounts were owned by the trust.
Well, that was the thing, is that the bank accounts were like in his trust name, so it was super simple.
Yeah. So the range I even saw an advertisement the other day, and I don't know if it was an attorney that was doing this, because it was actually a broker, a real estate broker that was putting on like a draft your own will seminar, and they're like, this advertisement was like, oh, we could get you a trust for $500 for a single person, $600 for a married person. And when I see that, I cringe, because I'm like, whoever's doing that trust for them is not even close to an expert on trust law. They're just getting the documents, filling in the blanks, and giving it out there, which can have dire consequences. My trusts range from about $2,500 to up to $4,500. I think in these times I'm gonna decrease that price just because I'm trying to do something as a public service, and usually I don't do. Like I said, the 3 minimum documents, healthcare directive, power of attorney, and HIPAA release, I don't do those separately, but I'm going to start doing those separately for the people that want those minimum documents. So a trust is going to be more expensive than a will. A will, you could probably get an attorney to do one, very simple will for probably a little less than $1,000.
Yeah, but then, like you said, you're going to be paying the $1,000 when you go to court and fees and all that kind of thing. I think that's the thing that people don't realize is like, just saying. I mean, we're kind of, and anyone in our world, everyone can find someone cheaper. It's just true.
Exactly.
There's for sale by owners. There's the flat fee companies or whatever. But then the problem is that if everything goes smooth, right? Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah. Right. Perfect. I always tell people, you know what? That you have that perfect house that's in a hot market, and everything done right, and there's buyers up the yang yang, great. Appraisal comes in, great. No repairs, great. Yeah, of course, you could have probably done it on your own. But what you're paying for is when everything goes south.
Exactly.
Right? I'm going to give a shout out to Mike for a second, because he's on here. Because Mike handled my grandpa's trust. Is that like, I went to the bank. The trust name was too long. They couldn't put on the check. Then the account. I called Mike and I said, Mike, I need the shorter trust name. And he goes, okay, this is what your trust name is going to be. If I had to do that on my own, or I was trying to call someone and that never got back to me, I would have never been able to transfer those funds into an account. And then maybe I'm still sitting here with my, waiting. Who knows? Or I can't. I don't know how to refile a trust name. I have no idea. And who would think like Wells Fargo, you can't have a certain amount of words on an account? I had no idea, because it wouldn't fit on the check. So that's why they couldn't do it. So, and then even the aspect of like, do we have to pay taxes on this money? Where is this money coming from? Where is that coming from? Hey, I need you to write up, going through the process, like you have to fill out paperwork, and everyone has to confirm. Oh, I have that paperwork for you today. Nice. The paperwork for everyone has to receive what they're funding. You know what I mean? Yeah. And they all have to agree to it. So, I know people think like $2,500 might be much, but if you own property, right? Oh, yeah. If you have to go through probate, what people don't realize is that when you go to probate, or if your house is sitting on the market and no one can pay that mortgage, you're going to go to foreclosure. You're going to go into foreclosure. Yeah. Because you get 3 months. So you might lose more than you're going to cost you at the $2,500. Oh, yeah. You know what I mean? And so I think people need to realize that it's just like we pay insurance every month, just because we have car insurance, we have all these protections for when everything goes wrong. Yeah. And you got to be protected, and I don't think people realize, I could have read the trust out and figured it out kind of.
Yeah.
But then the first time I hit a brick wall, I would have been like, what do I do now? You know what I mean? And I wouldn't have known what to do. I wouldn't have known how to change a trust name, or, hey, I need to do this, or how's this going to work? And, I didn't know I had to, because luckily ours was just family, but what if there was outside family that we didn't agree with? Like, luckily for, like, this one's like so simple. It's like everyone's like close, everyone's cool, everyone trusts everyone. But what if they don't? Yeah. All of a sudden now you're arguing about things, and luckily we don't have that. I mean, there was like one little moment I like shut my parents down. I said no, but luckily that's why I was in charge. So, well, why don't you do this, Mike? What's something you think that the most people do not know that is so important that you wish everyone knew about what you do?
I think the most important thing for me is really the value of peace of mind. Because, especially right now, you see once emotions run high, whether it's the coronavirus panic, or whether it's the death of a family member, when our brains are flooded with emotion, we lose rationality, we just get affected very, very deeply, and families get torn apart, and, homes. I mean, that's a huge thing we didn't talk about a lot. If there's a mortgage, if there's property taxes, people lose homes.
We can't even pull from those accounts.
Exactly.
Say your person that passed away has the money to pay the mortgage. If you don't have access to those accounts, you can't pull anything.
Yeah, and it's a huge headache. And what I see from the clients that I have on the other side, after somebody has passed away and they have to do a probate, is they're stressed. They don't have the ability to grieve for their loved one, which is very important from a mental health standpoint. They can't do that because now they have to go through all this paperwork, sign all these documents, go to court. And so for me, the biggest value is, think about the value of feeling like if something happens, everything's going to be okay. Your family is going to be taken care of. Your family is going to stay together. They're not going to fight. They're not going to start, I mean, families get torn apart because of these things.
Well, and I think that's the thing that it's almost like if you don't have one and you're not setting your family up, then that you're just choosing not to look out for them. Because when you don't, there's already, like, going back to personal situation I've just handled last year, like, when you don't have to make any decisions, like, you're making decisions where you're making decisions on the last few weeks of someone's life, where they're going to live, where they're going to be buried.
Yeah, man.
All these things that you have to calculate, and where is everything coming from? When you don't have to when you're not having to worry about anything else, like, what are we going to do with this? I mean, look, my grandpa didn't own real estate, but it's like, what if we had houses? And what if he didn't have a trust? And then I'm scrambling to find all his accounts because he had stocks, he had this stuff, he had that stuff. It was all written down. I didn't have to worry about those decisions. They were already mapped out for me. And I didn't have to worry about decisions on if he went into a coma, what decision I had to make. Like, he already made the decision for me, which was very, like, that was my grandpa for you. He was always on, that's why we're just alike. He always liked being in control, like knowing what was going on. And so it's like, I didn't have to even think about, like, I didn't have to think, does he want to be buried or cremated? Like, that's a big thing too, that people like, you're having to make those decisions. And so I think people need to realize is that the stress that you'll take off your family when you have one of these, because I went through it, is so game changer, because they're not having to make the hard decisions. You've already made them for them. That's it. You've already made the hard decisions. And that's so beneficial, because they can actually enjoy and grieve and whatever. Because what people don't realize, and this is the first death I ever had to handle, it's like, it's a lot of work. Just scheduling everything, trying to find where he's going to be buried, trying to figure that, ordering a casket. After, everything else, like, it's freaking hard, and it's so busy, and it's a small short of time. It's like 1 or 2 weeks. It's not like you have months to and you still have, because this is sad, guys, and I'm going to say it, like, even though someone passes away or you're in hard times, the world doesn't stop. It just doesn't. You still have to go to work. You still have, if you're in our industry, you still have clients. I mean, I was taking phone calls that night after my grandpa passed away because I had to. I had to, but he would have wanted that. I mean, my grandpa was all about the deal. Like, he didn't care. He's like, do the deal. He was all about, go make your money. And that's one of the last things he ever said to me was, go make some money. So that's the thing that I think people need to realize is that when you don't prepare, even though it's something we don't want to think about, it's going to happen. You're going to pass away one day, and you're going to have to pay taxes for your whole life. Other than that, those are only two things we can guarantee. So I want to thank Mike for coming in here, because my goal moving forward, especially in these weird times and in general, I want to push out as much content for people as possible, because I think a lot of people aren't providing enough value. I really don't. And I think with this day and age, and that's why I'm so happy to see you doing tons of videos, is that a lot of people just don't know. They just don't know the steps. And the problem is that just this week, I posted something earlier this week or yesterday. Why is Brent jumping on down and up out there? But a lot of people are now reaching out to me. Should I buy? Should I not? Should I sell? Should I refi? Dude, just lean on the experts. We do this every day. And the one thing that you said earlier, we're not emotionally connected. Right? I'm not emotionally connected to your house, and I'm not emotionally connected to a house we put an offer in. Just like you. At the end of the day, you're just reading a piece of paper. You feel grievance for someone passing, but you're not involved in that. Mm-hmm. You're not involved in the aspect of you just lost to someone. And so we can make decisions better. Exactly. And I always say my job is to stay unemotional. My job is to make the best decision for my clients, just like you. You're both to make the best decision for your clients, and you're not emotionally, because like you said, emotions get involved. Yeah. You get. That's why I've never liked a house I've ever shown. You know that? Really? Going to real estate for 1 second. I have never liked a house I've shown, and there people were like, "How do you never liked any house you've ever looked at with all your clients?" Because the moment I like it, then I'll make a poor decision for my clients, because now I'm emotionally involved. My job is to hate a house. I hate every house I show, because then it's my job to make the best decision for my clients, not what I think, because I'm emotionally involved in that deal. Just like you. It's probably a little bit harder to, if you're handling your own trust than if you're handling someone else's trust. So, but Mike, why don't you tell everyone the best way to get a hold of you, and the best way to reach out to you and stay in front of you and see your content? Tell everyone how to get a hold of you.
Yeah, so you could keep up with my daily content on Instagram. My handle is mike.ortiz.1000, or on Facebook. I don't know my Facebook handle, but my website is premiumestateplanning.com, and my email that you guys can email is mail, M-A-I-L, at premiumestateplanning.com. I have tons of info on my website as well, where you can start your education process, but email is the best thing. You can call me 951-289-4143. And, just FYI, I'm transitioning my office to be more virtual and remote, because we need to maintain that distance from people, and there are some things in estate planning that we need notarized. So we're luckily I'm part of a great team of nationwide estate planning attorneys, and we're making the changes to make sure that we're going to still be able to provide these services in a safe way. So find me on Instagram. I put out videos there every day, or go to my website. I have a lot of info, and email me, and I'll get back to you, and we can start working on it. I'll also have some webinars coming out. So if you go to my website and put your email in one of the email grabbers, I'll send you info on the webinars I'm going to be putting out soon, to educate yourself.
Awesome, guys. And remember, in the crazy times, that's when you need to lean on the professionals enough. And remember, stop asking people that don't know, that are not in the game. And I always tell people, I don't give a crap if you were a lawyer 30 years ago. I don't give a crap if you were a real estate agent 5 years ago or a year ago. If you're not in the game every single day, you don't know what's going on. So always lean on the professionals. And you know what? Always get a second opinion. Even if you're looking to sell your house with me, always get a second opinion. Because then I always say, then at least now you thought you were working with the best, and now you know you're working with the best. So thanks, guys. Remember, we're always here to help you guys.
All right.